claims.
One of the things that, this is a bit of an aside, but one of the things that you just reminded me of, which is underpinning this whole conversation, which underpins your book, which underpins a lot of religion, is the fact of consciousness, the fact of self-awareness. You write in the book, that we're built out of the same atoms as a ham sandwich, right? So the birth of consciousness has got to be the result of some kind of organization, just arranging atoms in ways that seem to bring about an experience of being those atoms. And you talk about Nagel's, what it's like to be a bat, his famous essay. In terms of eating meat, that ham sandwich obviously used to be sentient in some capacity, at least the ham bit of it did. Does this make you reflect, when you think about the fact of our own consciousness and our own sentience, about the ethics of using other sentient creatures for food?
Yeah, it's something that probably was even more relevant to my last book, The Moral Landscape. But I'm well aware that the industry that gives us most of the meat we eat is just a horror show in that it creates unnecessary suffering for billions of sentient creatures, which are almost certainly conscious and capable of suffering. So I just think our ethical responsibilities and our ethical concern should scale to the degree to which any given animal is conscious. So if you're driving home today and you see a insect splatter on your windshield, well, that's one sort of problem to have. If you run over a squirrel, that's another. If you run over a dog, that's another. If you happen to run over a chimpanzee, that's another. And if you run over somebody's child, that's another. This is a hierarchy of creatures and their possible conscious states, and the kinds of lives that can be improved or harmed based on how we interact with them. And so where you put the cut for the emergence of consciousness, I don't know. I don't know if insects are conscious. Nobody does. And your intuitions could be plausibly tipped one way or the other, depending on how you want to think about it. But whether or not a cricket is conscious, I don't think it's especially rational to lose much sleep over the suffering of crickets, as some people are wont to do. And you have a whole religion, Jainism, which is fundamentally based on non-harming, and they don't want to, they won't even harm insects. And some people worry about harming bacteria. They don't want to take antibiotics because they don't want to impose so much death and suffering on harmless bacteria.
Sure, but no point in building a straw man. You know what I'm talking about.
No, but I mean, so I'm saying there's a continuum here. And so, but once you get up into farm animals, then I think there's a real conversation to have about what can suffer and how much. And I think there may be counterintuitive truths there to discover. I mean, it may just be a fact that pigs can suffer much more than cows can, and therefore we should be much more concerned about pigs. Now, I don't know, in fact, if that's true, but it's totally possible that we could discover that that's true. And where do fish rank in this taxonomy of suffering? I don't know. I would guess that they're far lower than the kinds of animals we farm on land. But to go directly to your question, I think it is an issue, and how an animal, the kind of life an animal has before we kill it is very relevant, and in fact, maybe the most relevant thing. So, if you're going to go out and hunt a wild boar that has lived its life in blissful ignorance of the prospect of being killed, and then you kill it and eat it, that strikes me as significantly different than having an industry where we raise hogs in the most painful, seemingly the most painful circumstance we can impose on them for their entirety of their lives. So, I think if you want to be a vegetarian and you want an ethical argument to support your choice, I think it's a very easy case to make. I mean, the conscience of a vegetarian, I think, should be much cleaner than the conscience of someone who is eating meat, because there's a whole area of the unnecessary suffering imposed on other conscious creatures that you can claim to be not complicit in. And I think I was a vegetarian for 6 years I became anemic, and it was not really working for me. And then I ceased to be a vegetarian. But I've gotten sufficient amount of pressure from readers on this subject that I'm thinking of experimenting with it again, because it was certainly, I was not the smartest vegetarian in the world in how I went about it. But yeah, I think it is an ethical issue, and someone like Peter Singer, I think, has a lot of wisdom in his discussion of how unconscionable it is that we treat animals the way that we do. But the crucial thing I want to just reiterate is that there is a hierarchy here. I think it is totally appropriate to be a speciesist, a so-called speciesist, in favoring the lives of humans over the lives of mice and rats and et cetera. I mean, it's not the kind of, I chose doing my neuroscience PhD not to experiment on animals because I didn't want to live that way. I didn't want to get up every morning and have to go saw the scalp off of a rat. But I think it's absolutely clear that there's certain kinds of medical research that is indispensable and ethical to do, and this entails the killing of animals and animals who cannot suffer as much as human beings, and whose suffering will lead to the massive mitigation of human suffering. And I think the ethical case for that is quite strong. And so people who drink the animal rights Kool-Aid and equate basically all conscious creatures with humanity in terms of ethical stature, I think that's a huge mistake.
I mean, I think Singer, though, just in his defense, would agree with you there that there's less moral culpability in killing an oyster than there is in killing a chimpanzee. I don't think that's what he means by speciesism. He means having no particularly good reason for distinguishing between the sentience and consciousness of different species, and favoring one species simply because it happens to be Homo sapien. I think that's his understanding. But yeah, let's not get bogged down in that. Let's wrap it up.